Hey guys, and welcome to the Talk of Fame podcast. I'm your host, Kai Montigny, and I am so happy to introduce you to David Edward, who served as a special agent in U.S. Army in the 1980s and 90s and is a veteran of multiple overseas combat tours. He was also the special agent in charge of the 1990 Panama Canal counter-terrorism that threat assessment report to the U.S. Congress. He's a United States Army Intelligence School graduate where he studied advanced human intelligence and the battlefield counterintelligence, also competing training at the Jungle Operations Training Center in Panama, Central America. He holds advanced degrees in engineering, including a doctorate in engineering, three related M.Sc degrees, an undergrad degree in business. He's also currently the director of the Institute for Advanced Christian Research and is the author of over 50 books, which is seriously insane. But his best-selling thriller, Panama Red, which has sold over 250,000 copies and is based on true events in his life, and chronicles U.S. military activities and Norwegia's 1980 dictatorship. It exposes the early stages of child trafficking crisis we face today. David, it is such an honor to have you on the podcast today. Thank you so much for taking the time. I apologize for such a long intro.
Well, Kylie, it's great to just have you read that whole thing. Holy cow, that was a mouthful. Who wrote that nonsense?
That was actually one of his exact thing. I'm kidding, but like I know like you did like some training at the operations center in Panama Central America. Like, what was kind of like the training like at the training center?
Well,
Well,
it's an interesting question. Yeah, we're taking me back to my youth, right? Because we were just talking, and this is a little while ago now, the 1980s and 1990s. But yeah, so basically they had this thing. It's become what they call the Jungle Operations Warfare Training Center. I went before it was the Warfare Training Center. It was just like a survival school. So it was pretty cool. I was stationed in Panama, and this is before we invaded. I don't know if you remember, but the United States actually invaded Panama in December of 1989. And I was there a couple years before that, and I was there through the invasion. But the what you learn how to do is pretty neat. It's a 2 week course. That's all how long it is, and you learn how to survive in the jungle, basically. And the most interesting thing that you have to do, and they wait till the end, is you have to learn how do you get water, how do you eat, all that stuff. And at the very end, they bring in like this huge 15-foot python. They cut its head off with a machete, and you have to drink the blood to graduate. That's like, and they make it last, right? Because who wants to do that? But I did it. Everyone did it. They had to. And the jungle. Have you ever been in the jungle? I don't know if that's something that you've
I
done or not.
never did, but I always
No.
wanted to though. Like I seen, of course, pictures, but I never been inside like an actual type of like jungle type of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty awful. It's,
Really?
everything in it wants to kill you or eat you or be a problem. And this school is interesting because you really and I read about it and I kind of knew what I was walking into, but you're never inside. The whole course is taught in the jungle, and from the first moment of the course, you're in the jungle. And what happens is if you get wet on the first day, then you're pretty much wet for the whole time that you're there. And that happened to me. I put my boots in water. I didn't know. That's the whole point of that's what you're learning, and it's miserable. And then my feet and socks were wet, the whole 2 weeks, which is just awful. But it's a grueling. It was a grueling course. And the last thing they do before you have to drink the snake blood is they helicopter you into the actual real jungle, and you have a map and a compass, and you got 3 days to find your way out. So you really do learn how to survive. And I used it. I then after that I took a vacation. I guess we call it a vacation, and I went to the Dorian Gap, which it's southern Panama, and it includes the border between Panama and Colombia. It's some of the densest, almost awfulest jungle in the world. But I saw some really cool things. I mean, there's like petroglyphs on big boulders and streams. I mean, dozens of miles into the jungle, and just all kinds of fascinating things. There's a group of people there called the Wargandi, and I stayed at their village for 2 nights. And all kinds of just really cool stuff, because I knew how to survive in the jungle, I was then able to go do.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Like, did you able to get through the jungle in 3 days, or weren't you able to?
Oh yeah, I found my way. I'm here. I made it. I made it out. It took all 3. It's hard. So the big thing you have to learn how to do is navigate by looking, because you have a map, but this is before GPS, this is before any of this. You literally have a piece of paper with a drawing on it that's the
Mm-hmm.
map, and then you have to be able to kind of coordinate where you are based upon the peaks and the heights and the sun and all that stuff, and then you kind of find your way out. So I found my way out. I was okay at it. I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it again, but I'm very glad that I did it. If that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah, like how long were you in Panama for? Were you just there for the 2 week training or were you there for a couple of years?
No,
Like
I
you
was stationed there. I was there for about a little over 3 years. So I got there, and there's a whole history, and I use this backstory in some of my books because the main books, Panama Red, takes place at the same time historically that I was there. And they had in May of '89, they had an election that just went completely south, and Noriega canceled it, and the guy who I forget his name, who was running against Noriega's candidate, they thought had won, but then he pulled up thugs and they beat him. And there's a famous Time magazine photo where the guy's, beaten bloody and stuff. So it was kind of a mess. Noriega, what he was doing, and this kind of leads into some of the other questions you might have, because I secretly have seen the questions that you're going to ask me.
yeah.
Yeah, Noriega he had been a CIA asset, we'll call it. So he'd been trained by the CIA and he was friendly to the CIA. But when he kind of took over Panama in the late '80s, what he decided he wanted to do was turn Panama kind of into the Switzerland of the Central America, a banking hub. And then he partnered with Pablo Escobar, who was running drugs and cocaine into the U.S. And
Mm-hmm.
the big thing, it's hard to think back to those times. It's before there was any digital currency. And Pablo Escobar, I think he was making like $70 million a day in cash or something
Oh,
like that.
wow.
But it's cash, it's literal physical cash money. So just the logistics of moving that around were becoming impossible. So Noriega had kind of become friendly with him, and he was trying to put a banking infrastructure in place that he could run as a shell to help Escobar, with his business, and of course Noriega would get a cut in all that stuff. So it was really interesting times. And when I got sent down there, I had no idea what I was kind of walking into, but I wound up being part of some very pivotal events in history, which were interesting.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Like that's actually insane, $70 million a day. Like that's something
So,
I hope to make in a year. Like I'm serious. Like
well,
that's
look,
actually
if you can
crazy.
make $70 million in a year, I will be your biggest fan. That good for you. That's a good goal. That's a reasonable goal. Good for you.
Like, seriously, like if I made $70 million a year, I literally would be the happiest person on earth. I would really retire at 16 years old. I'm serious.
Well, yeah, you don't have to have too many good years, right?
Exactly.
For that to yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Maybe this podcast will get enough views so that you can start making that.
Oh, fingers crossed. Let's hope for that.
Yeah,
But in what ways, like, do you think, like, special? I know, like, you were a special agent for a couple of years for different organizations in the military and everything. Like, how do you think, like, special agents, what kind of change in the U.S. Army or in general over the course of the next couple of
it's
years?
actually a good question. When I read that question, I was like, well, that's interesting. Because when I was in the training I went through, and then I was a field agent, so I was out in the field. It was kind of cool because I was enlisted, so I was very low ranking, but I didn't have to wear a uniform. I wore a suit and I had a badge, and the whole thing. And we were very much autonomous would not be the right word, but we had a lot of latitude in what we could do, the leads we could develop, and we did not have latitude in our cases. We would develop evidence, and then the case it would go up the chain and it would be approved as a case or not. But beyond that, we had a lot of we could pretty much do whatever we thought was right based on the rules. They've changed, and my MOS was called 97 Bravo, which they still have, but they've created another one called like 35 Echo, or I don't know what it is, some other one that's also a counterintelligence agent, and they've really restricted and pulled back what that role does now in the military. And counterintelligence, the mission of a counterintelligence agent is we were worried about something called SAIDA, which is an acronym, which is Subversion and Espionage Directed Against the United States Army. And our job was to go out and flush that out. But basically, and at the time, although it shows you that what's old is new again, at the time we were trained to fight the Soviets, the Russians, because they
Mhm.
were our enemies in the '80s. Now they
Yeah.
fell, I think they fell like in right around '89, right around the time we invaded Panama. But the counterintelligence agent, what they do is they look back on our forces, on the U.S. forces, and they see what we can figure out that we're doing. Because if we can figure it out by watching us, then our enemies can figure it out.
Yeah.
So that was part of the mission, and then the other part of the mission was if you have a mole or you have someone who's been turned and who's actually working for the Russians, say, our job would be to go undercover and investigate them and see if it was true that they were. We never found anyone that was, but we did do a number of undercover investigations. So it was. Look, I was incredibly lucky to get it. I actually enlisted at 11 Bravo, what they call 11 Bang Bang. It's just an infantry soldier. I did that because there was a $5,000 signing bonus, which was a lot of money back in the 1980s. But then I did well on the tests and stuff, so they didn't recruit me. That would overstate it. But they had a quota to fill. I met the quota, so they yanked me out of the infantry and put me in counterintelligence, which was awesome. Best thing that ever could have happened to me.
Ooh, that's seriously awesome. Like I'm kind of curious. I just came to mind right now, especially with everything with the Soviet Union back in the 80s and Russia and Ukraine war going on right now. Like how do you kind of like from your personal experience being in the military and everything, how do you kind of feel about their like Ukraine Russian war type of thing? Like
Well, so let's get philosophical to answer a question like that. So what is war, right? First off, war is pretty awful.
mm,
And war is, I think that there's a very famous saying that I'm going to forget, but it's something like, war is the last vestige of politics, right? So everything else
mm,
has failed, so you resort to fighting. And I think there's in today's world, and I would even argue the 80s were a little different. We've matured because of the internet and the ability to
mm,
communicate now. The idea to me, the idea of a military conflict seems unnecessary.
mm,
Now, if you're being attacked, if you're on the Ukraine side and all of a sudden there's Russian troops inside your border, you can argue that you have the right to defend yourself. So I'm not saying they don't have the right to defend themselves, but um, any conflict I think is unnecessary, and I think there are
mm,
ways around it. So I don't fully understand it. I guess that'd be the best way
yeah.
for me to put it. I keep up on the news. I'm not too into the news anymore because it's hard to listen to some of it and all that. But I think that generally speaking, those types of conflicts, I don't understand what it is that people in their lives when they get up that morning and they think, "Now today's the day we're going to nuke them." Let's go. And I mean, how many people have died in that thing? Hundreds
Mm,
of thousands, right?
yeah.
For what? For on either side? For what? And, so you know, and now that's an easy position to take because no one's shooting at me, right? And no, and I get to go to sleep and I feel pretty safe when I sleep. So that's a philosophical statement, but it's where I am. I live in Florida. If someone invaded Florida, I probably would have a different view of war or whatever. But for this one, I think that there probably were ways to prevent it, and there probably are ways to stop it, and I just don't understand why we let it go on.
I know, right? It's just like I know like what you said earlier, like back then, like to today's world in 2023, we didn't like they like back then you guys didn't have that technology to kind of be able
Didn't.
to like figure out like, oh, what's going on at this moment, whether it's say Russia or Ukraine or especially our home country of the United States, like what's going on. And that's like crazy with the internet these days. That, like you can always look up, let's just say like today's president of the United States, for example, and they can say like, oh, what happened in today's world? What did he say? What did he do? Like, what's going on in this country? Like, it's like you'll like find access to basically everything you want to hear or see, especially in
You know
2023
what's
with the internet.
interesting? And you asked me the question, so you get to hear my answer.
Yeah.
In the olden days, let's say the olden days, I'm sure there were agendas and all of that stuff, but the news it was late, so you would find out what happened days or weeks later. Now you find out minutes or seconds later.
Mm-hmm.
But it was generally geared towards informing you about what was going on. Now, today, I don't know a news source to go to where I don't have to first decide what political view I want. And then I
Mm-hmm.
find the political view I want, and then I go to that, and then I go and look at the news through that lens. I don't know a place where that's not the truth. That it's all news organizations that I know, and I find it frustrating because no matter what side of this thing you're on, everything now is filtered and spun, and it's trying to make another point, which it is how do you know, how do you ground yourself? And so what you have to do is you have to decide on the politics of it first, and then listen to the news. Where it used to be you'd go listen to the news and see what was going on and then make a decision politically on how you felt about it or whatever. So it's backwards, it's been turned around.
Mhm.
And for me, because I grew up in the other system, it's like nails on the chalkboard. I find just, keeping up with what's going on very difficult. I don't know, Kylie, for someone who like you who's only come up in this system, I don't know, what do you think of it? How do you get news?
Like especially like social media, especially with being a teenager and growing up with social media. Like you like especially like with like big social media apps like TikTok, Facebook,
Yeah,
Instagram, Twitter, well X now, but well, like as we formerly know as Twitter. But
yeah.
like or even watching like news, for example. I always don't know like people might find it weird for a 16-year-old watching news all the time. I do. But it's
Well,
even
that's
like
good.
for me as a
I think you're a
16-year-old,
squared away kid, by the way. So
thank you.
I'm
Like
glad that
even
you watch the news.
thank you. Even if it's like a 16-year-old, like you said earlier, it's hard to watch news at some points. It's
Yeah.
of course with the watching whether it's like something live on TV or just reading through articles on Google or something. It's sometimes it's very hard to read. Like sometimes I'll read through what's that TMZ. I'll read through their articles. Like I'll read through Fox News. I read everything that's like that what's going on, because if I'm like curious about like something that's going on, whether it's like entertainment, politics, sports, I'll go to sources I'm kind of am familiar with as a person, or as a journalist I'm mostly familiar with. But it's like especially growing up with social media, as a 16-year-old, like all we know as Gen Z people is social media. Like all of, like especially you will see everything on social media. And
Yeah.
so like especially nowadays, like it will take minutes for things to come out. Like it will take
Yeah.
like literally minutes. And like back then you guys will probably have to wait weeks or even a couple of
Certainly
days.
days. I mean, it wasn't the stone. I wasn't looking for smoke signals. But yeah, no, but I mean, like for example, when I was in Panama, in Fort Myers in Florida. So I subscribed to the Fort Myers paper, and every week they would mail me the prior week's papers. So yeah, so in that case, my news was between 3 and 10 days old. My local news for where I lived and stuff. Um, so yeah, I find that so. Now you mentioned you're a, a what, a Gen Z. Is
Mm-hmm.
that how
Yeah.
do you know you're a Gen Z? How do you
Well,
know that?
basically based
They
off
tell
my age, basically.
is that but I mean, yeah. So I mean, but so I guess all your social media feeds and stuff kind of categorize you, and that's how you now have to see. That's to me, that's terrible. I hate that. I hate that. I'm very lucky. I was born after the boomers. I'm like in a little tiny window. So I'm not a boomer, but I'm not. I don't even know what came next. Whatever came next, I'm not that either. So I'm not I'm not in any group. But yeah, everything we do now is we put ourselves in these buckets. Everything's a bucket, and then everything's they call it tribal, right? So we all have to think the same if you're in that bucket or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. So if you're a Gen Z, what does that mean? What's a Gen Z mean?
Like
Gen Z,
honestly, I'm
like a
gonna be quite
genie.
honest with you. I have no clue. I swear I have no clue. I just know like with social media, it's just like they post things that'll make you believe that you're part of Gen Z or millennial or
Yeah,
part of this
yeah.
like thing because of like your age or when you're what year you're born or like what kind of group are you in. They may kind of social media makes you believe like you're part of this group based off your age or who you follow.
Which is terrible. I view the internet. Although I earn my living on the internet. I mean, just like you're doing this on the internet.
Mhm.
All the stuff I do, I use the internet, so it's good for some things. But from a social standpoint, um, I wonder if it's really as good. I mean, especially if you're a Gen Z, but you don't know what it means. But that's a label that's been applied to you, right? It's got nothing to do with you. Nothing to do with you. But anyway, I mean, I'll soapbox. The danger is I'll soapbox on a lot of stuff, so I don't want to soapbox on that. But and by the way, what you're doing with the news is right. The only thing I'll suggest also, and it sounds like you go to a variety of sources, which is good. None of it's real. Denzel Washington said, "If you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you do watch the news, you're misinformed."
Mhm.
So what I do, which um, I would suggest, it seems like good ways, not only read what they're telling you, but always ask yourself why. Why are they telling me this particular thing compared to something else? And that might at least help you get the bigger picture of what's really going on. So
Yeah, because I know like with a lot of like news stories, I'm not speaking for every like news station, but I know like with like most news stations, whether it's like your local news station or like the like a thing that covers basically everyone, like a big news station, is that like I think they're probably the most important mission on their end is probably like, oh, what's gonna basically get like viewers pissed or
they're
like
companies. They're making money. So all they do, and that's what, and this is because of the internet and everything. And it was always true, but not to this degree. But yeah, so what they want to do is get you to click on something so they can bring a page up, and they don't care what's on the page. They want to sell the advertising that's around the page, right? That's on the top or the bottom of the banners and all that stuff. And then they make money. So the more stuff they can get you to click on, the more scrolls they can do and all that stuff. Uh, that's what they're feeding you. And if it's based on something real, that's great. If it's not, they don't care. They still make their money. So they're all big corporations. Now, and you now, what are you? Are you going to go work for a corporation? Is that your goal in life? What are you gonna do?
like I definitely do want to be like a journalist. Like I'm
Okay.
not sure if I want to go into like a big corporation, whether it's like a big news outlet. I'm not sure like if I want to go whether it's like sports, for example, or entertainment, politics. I have no idea. But I do. My biggest goal is to definitely whether it's like working on like a media station locally or
Sure.
like a big local station. Like it all depends how what life takes me because you have no idea until like the opportunities just get thrown at you.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, the other thing, our society, and it was true for me too, which is you have to pick who you want to be before you have any clue what any of it means, right?
Mhm.
And if you don't pick, yeah, then you wind up potentially in something that you don't like. So it's kind of backwards, really.
Mhm.
But I think, look, I think we need a new generation of people who can go back and just report stuff, right?
Mhm.
Don't worry about what I think of it. Just tell me the truth.
Mhm.
That's what I want. I'm selfishly, that's what I want from news. So I'm going to have to now follow you when you get your reporting assignments, and um, hopefully you'll be one of those down the middle facts rule kind of reporters.
Let's hope so.
Let's
That
hope so.
sounds my confidence there. Let's just hope so.
Yeah.
But as to kind of switch topics a bit, like what was kind of like your role like as a special agent in the U.S. Army? Like what did it kind of look like for you?
Well, so in Panama, I lived on a base called Corazal, which was kind of not that great a base. And we were in what you would consider like dorms, like college dorms. And I had a foot in both worlds. I had a foot in the military world, so we had to get up every morning at 4 a.m. and we had to go run 3 to 5 miles and do PT and all that stuff, Army stuff. And then I would come back and I'd have breakfast in the mess hall. It was free. All the food was free, which is a really good deal, by the way.
Mhm.
And then I would dress, and not in the most days, not in the uniform, but in a suit. And we had these little Toyota um, cars. I don't even know if they're called sedans, I guess, but they're little. And then we would go to an office building on the Air Force Base, and then that part of it looked like a job, like any job you see, today. And then we would do that. And then at lunch, we would take off. We'd have to go back to the base, change into our fatigues, and do some kind of detail. And then we'd come and do the afternoon. And we just did that every day. And I got most weekends I got off. And it was just kind of a job. Now, when we invaded, when we invaded Panama, it was different. And then I spent 6 months at the Soto Cano Air Base in Honduras. And I don't remember. Have you ever heard of a thing called Iran Contra? Does that name ring a bell? It's old. It was a
And
big deal
I'm
for
not
me.
sure. Maybe it does. Maybe I just not think of it at the top of my head though.
Yeah, Ollie North and everything. It turns out I didn't know this at the time, but I was right there. I was there in the middle of this. And what Iran Contra was is a little complicated, but they were selling arms into Nicaragua to raise money for something with Iran hostages or something. It's really confusing. But this Soto Cano Air Base in Honduras is where they were running the arms through. And I saw some of it. I had no clue what it was. My mission there, when I was there, what we were doing is Pablo Escobar's was flying cocaine up in DC 9s from Honduras into Texas and New Mexico, and he was refueling in Honduras. So what we would do is we'd get tips when they were coming in, and my job was to drive the Jeep. And I would drive the Jeep, and we were working with the DEA, and there were FBI guys there too, which I never understood because I didn't think the FBI was supposed to work outside the border, but whatever. And then I would drive the Jeep and we'd go up when the planes landed and we'd, confiscate them and arrest the people. And that was because this was all during the war on drugs and all kinds of 80s stuff. So that was different. That was, you're living basically in a tent. It's not quite a tent, but it's not a building either. And it's a very rugged existence. I did that for 6 months. And then I came back to the States. I was at Fort Monmouth for 3-4 months, and then I out processed. And Fort Monmouth is in New Jersey.
That's interesting. Like especially with like you're like were you like there like during like when that whole stuff, I know you said you were there, but like did you kind of see that like a bunch of that stuff like with the invasion kind of happen, or were you just like kind of like, oh, I'm just hearing stuff from people during
The invasion, the Panama
yeah
invasion? Yeah. Oh
yeah.
no. Oh yeah. In fact, my job during the invasion was I was with I think it was the 111th Infantry. I was attached to them because they were attacking the Commandancia, which was the equivalent of their Pentagon. And my job, I wasn't the frontline guy, even though I wound up being very close to the front line. But we took the building and I was with them. And my job was then to inventory and confiscate intelligence assets. So, if an enemy broke into the Pentagon, there'd be lots of stuff they were interested in. And that was the same way for us. So I went in with the 111th Infantry. We took the Commandancia. I got a bunch of intel, brought it back. And then I was on the document retrieval team because Noriega worked some from his house and all kinds of stuff. And so we went around for that week, and we were basically confiscating intelligence documents. When I was done with that, I was at the processing center. So we had all the refugees and all the people we had captured, and I was part of the interrogation team. I didn't speak Spanish well enough to interrogate anybody, but I kind of ran the pin where they were, and I made sure that no one got out of line or escaped or killed me or any of that stuff.
Ooh, that's interesting. And I kind of want, before we head up, I wanted to ask you, like, did you write Panama Red after you like were stationed there, or did you kind of write it like when you're currently stationed at that moment?
I wrote Panama Red 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Ooh.
So it's very much an old guy remembering the good old days. Although the book, it's not a memoir by any stretch. It's a thriller, and I just based it on a number of the skirmishes and the events and the different things. So, for example, we had a guy, he was captured by the PDF. So in October to December '89, things kind of fell apart. And there was a guy, he was in a laundromat, and the PDF was the Panamanian Defense Force. It's both the police force and the military of Panama. And they arrested this guy, and we had to go get him from a PDF substation. So that's in the book. It's not told that way, but like those events are in the book. When I went into the Darien Gap and stayed with the Wagandi Indians and stuff, that's in the book. Again, it's not a memoir of what I did, but I based what I did. I used, they say write what you know. So I use those experiences to make the book very real. And the feedback I do get very consistently in the book is that there's just more of that book than any other thing I've written, is there is a sense of authenticity, to the events and stuff that are going on.
Like, how did you kind of like bring like your? I know, like you said, it was like kind of like a thriller, but I added some things to kind of like make it like not say interesting, but just like make it like a good read to make it seem like real type of thing. Like,
Yeah.
how did you kind of like make like your like experiences and everything into that book, even though you didn't want to kind of make it as necessarily like a memoir type of
Yeah.
thing? Like, how did you kind of put those like thriller and like your experiences kind of together?
That's a good question. And I actually thought about this a lot. So what I did is I made up a fake bad guy, and I had the bad guy orchestrating events that led to all of the different action scenes and conflict in the book. So the bad guy in the book is actually a woman. Her name's Kimberly Sharp. She's an ex Mexican Air Force officer, and she's a bad dude. And she's kind of driving things and controlling things. And then the main character, Dirk, is kind of at the whim of this and figuring it out and fighting his way through it. So the story, she drives the narrative of the story, which is made up. It's just a thriller, like a good one, I think. But then as stuff had to happen, I drew from my personal experiences to make the action more real. And it seemed it worked pretty well. In the next book, which you can't see, Drive Faster,
Mm.
I did less of that, but still some of it. and people pick up on that. And then the rest of the books are more just made up thrillers. There's still a lot of military. I was in it for a while, so that there's military foundation, but they're more made up. But yeah, Panama Red, and then a little bit of Drive Faster are the action could have been a memoir. Just the context of it would have been very different.
Ooh, gotcha. And like I like love everything like you're basically doing. I want to like go into that much time. I know and we're running out of time, but thank you for everything you're doing. I know I had to introduce my uncle to your books. He's basically very interested in those like kind of not military, but he's basically like a big like history type of person. So I have to introduce him to like your books and everything. And
Well,
um
and
as
just so you know, I've got almost all my books are free at this point. The Kindle
oh
version is
really?
free. Yeah, so you just go on Amazon. It's free. Panama Red's the big one. There's hundreds and hundreds of reviews. And it seems to be a book people like. So yeah, if you're interested, won't cost you anything but time, and I think it's time well spent. So
Ooh,
yeah, absolutely.
perfect. I definitely probably buy the Panama book later on tonight to get it to him. Maybe for a Christmas present. Who
Got
knows?
it. Okay. Yeah,
But
yeah.
thank you so much, David, for coming on and taking the time. I appreciate so much. Your work is just absolutely amazing. And thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I know like it's much appreciated and I hope everyone took in as much knowledge as they could. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Well, look, Kylie, you keep doing what you're doing too, because what you're doing is just as important as anything I've ever done. And we need people like you because you're going to run this place in 10 years. I'm rooting for you. Keep
Thank
doing it.
you. Maybe future president of the United States. Just kidding.
Yeah.
But
I'll vote for you as long as I like your policies.
who knows? As long as the policies are good. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for listening. I hope everyone has a great day. And thank you, David, again. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Yep.